Good girl. All right. Well, we will go ahead and just get into our introduction so that we can be mindful of everybody's time. Thank you all so much for joining tonight's conservation conversation. We are so excited to have you. I'm Kate. I'm with Environment Maryland, and I just want to do with some new people, a quick introduction for what these conversations are. Conservation Conversations are a weekly webinar that allow us to sort of recenter nature in our lives in a time where we need it more than ever. And so this is a time where we're going to bring different experts and activists and artists and amazing people who are interacting with the natural world in different ways, and hopefully you'll learn something and be inspired. And so it just allows us to kind of shift and get a whole new perspective on a lot of different nature and conservation topics. So I'm going to turn it over to Bridget in a minute to introduce our incredible guest today, which we're so excited about. But we sort of wanted to give you an idea of the scope of the problem that our guest is going to be talking about tonight. So every year, 8 million tons of additional plastic enters our waterways. That's enough added plastic annually to line every foot of coastline with 5 plastic bags. By 2050, experts predict that there will be more plastic in our oceans than fish. And something that you may not know about plastic is that in every stage of its life cycle, it actually emits greenhouse gases. So from production to disposal, it is a huge part of the climate crisis. Last year alone, the production and incineration of plastic produced more than 850 million metric tons of greenhouse gases. And so in Maryland, for our guests there, you'll know that we have been a part of trying to take action on plastic pollution legislatively with bans on plastic bags and certain other plastics, and just trying to do the education piece. And that is what is so exciting about our guest tonight, is just the way that she is going to shift our whole way of interacting with plastic and trash, and I think it's just going to be great. So I am now going to turn it over to Bridget to do an introduction, and there we go.
Thanks, Kate. So I am Bridget Sanderson. I'm the Director of Environment Missouri, based out of Kansas City. Yeah, just to give you a little bit of a heads up about specifically what Environment Missouri is doing, again, also about, our plastic pollution. We are currently working to repeal a plastic preemption law that's in place across the state of Missouri, which means that basically cities and counties are prohibited from, putting any type of ban or fee or tax on plastic bags. And then on top of that, they're trying to extend it to polystyrene as well. And so we're trying to repeal those so at least cities and counties can, do the work to basically help prevent this plastic preemption law or plastic pollution issue. And then also on a national level, one of our colleagues from Environment Montana last year released a really wonderful report on microplastics and kind of illustrated how prominent our plastic pollution problem it actually really is. So in Montana, they tested about 50 water sites, and most of them were important fishing sites to the state. And in those 50 sites, they actually found 66% of them contained one or more type of microplastics in the water. One of the most commonly found plastic types was hard plastics. And these come from things like water bottles, polystyrene, of course, and other disposable containers. And this also provides really troubling data, specifically in Missouri. I'm sure Texas can feel the same way, for people that live further away from a water source than they do in Montana. So anybody who lives downstream or downriver from Montana, this is all very troubling data that they're finding 66% of their sites have microplastics found in them. And so with that, I would love to introduce our guest speaker today, which I'm so excited to have you on, Calder. I was actually introduced to your Instagram about a year ago through our mutual friend, Emily Weber, and who I'm pretty sure, as I understand, was a former roommate of yours when you were getting your BFA
Hi, Emily.
at the Kansas City Art Institute.
Yes.
So Calder is an artist, educator, and advocate. She transforms trash into beautifully crafted creatures, which I've seen plenty of them and I love them wholeheartedly. While, she is building educational experiences about environmental stewardship as well. So one of the main reasons we are having her on today. She's engaged hundreds of museum visitors through her public workshops and art projects, including the Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art, Women in Their Work, the American Museum of Natural History, and the Utah Museum of Contemporary Art. She has starred in an episode of the PBS series Art in Context and 2 Disney Channel commercials, sharing her inspirational messages about art and plastic pollution with a really awesome sculpture of Ariel the mermaid. Calder has a background in art administration, higher education, and city government, providing professional development for artists. Calder and her best friend Pixel, who I saw earlier, and I'm hoping that Pixel will show up again during this, reside in her hometown of Austin, Texas, where she is the Career Services Manager and lecturer at the University of Texas. So Calder, we're gonna give it to you and thank you again so much for coming on to Conservation Conversations.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my story too. I'm going to share my screen here. And I'm a visual artist, so it's good to have visuals, right? I want to tell you a little bit about my journey from what I like to call artist to advocate. I have always been an artist, but I'm going to tell you about, it's maybe been the last 5 or 6 years of my journey where I really figured out who I am as a creative and how I can be more generous with my creativity. So this first image, this is from the Museum. I've been showing regularly with children's museums. They have artist in residence program. So I'll show you some visuals from this exhibition called Dream Tomorrow Today, where we envisioned what the future could look like. So in my presentation, most importantly, I just want you to see potential. It's all about seeing potential in what art can do, what these materials that have proliferated the planet and that we culturally consider waste, that it has potential. And then also potential in all these students that I get to work with too. So yeah, artist advocate, and then I'm gonna also talk a little bit about how I use education as an art medium as well. So I have always been an artist. I grew up in Austin, Texas. This is a mandala of all my favorite fauna in Austin, and Austin was a very unique place to grow up. I'm definitely a product of my environment. Recycling was part of the zeitgeist in the 90s. I was a Captain Planet kid. In the middle of my mandala is the Barton Springs blind salamander, our hometown hero. And I've spent a lot of time in Barton Springs. We have one of the largest populations of urban bats under the Congress Avenue Bridge. And now we are also proliferating with monk parakeets. So I've always been cognizant of my unique biodome and feeling like I need to protect it and take care of it. I have always basically loved animals. And there's Pixel. So I originally I got my degree from the Kansas City Art Institute in ceramics and art history. I made art all kinds of ways, but in college, they'd ask you to decide a major, a material. And so I used clay. And I continued to sculpt animals, and they would tell stories about the environment or the plight of man dealing with natural phenomena. But after I graduated from college, I started to ask myself some questions about my medium, especially since I didn't have access to a ceramic studio, and clay started to feel very arbitrary for me. I was like, what am I doing with this material? I'm talking about the environment, and here I'm using this material that uses an exorbitant amount of energy in order to turn it into stone. You're literally tearing it out of the earth to extract the material. It's full of toxic chemicals, some of which we were warned could cause brain damage if we weren't wearing our respirator. So it's like, what is this material doing for me? Just after undergrad too, I took up birding. So I became a bird watcher and got really serious about some, Cornell and eBird and iBird, and participating in bird counts in Kansas City. And I received a gift of handmade bird feeders that I placed in my yard, and I became more and more familiar with the birds that would come and visit my yard and be able to identify their songs and their colors and their behaviors. And the most interesting behavior of all was, I'm sure you've all seen a nest that was built out of trash, that these animals are collecting these material in the environment and maximizing it, using its utility of its plasticity and its strength in order to build their architecture. And that was a profound moment for me, was that made me realize that waste is a human cultural problem. If it exists out in nature, nature's going to use it. So I thought, I need to be more like a bird. So the first project that involved trash, this is about 2013, I think, or 2014 that I made these pieces, called the Synanthrope Station. Synanthrope is an animal that thrives in the human world. So it's a conjunction symbiosis, anthrope with man. So I really got more interested in these urban wildlife. I told you I loved my urban bats and became obsessed with these animals that shared the environment with me. I would collect refuse from the site, put it inside of a ceramic structure, and they came in different iterations. But I would put my supply station in a tree, and a bird would build their nest with those materials in the tree, and we got to collaborate. I gave some synanthrope pods to some other birders that I had met through my bird counts. It's the larger synanthrope station you see here with the pods. That sat in my yard for a while. It was my first piece of public art kind of a portfolio. Shot it really nice from an angle, and then now I have a public art portfolio, and it sat in my front lawn for a while. Until finally it found its final resting home at Cunningham Elementary. They had a grant to pay an artist for work to be on campus that showed compassion. So I worked with some kids to make both bird feeders and pods for the Synanthrope Station. Around the same time, I had a lot of different health things happen. And my doctor prescribed me birth control for one of them, and I took a series of different prescriptions, and my body did not like it. And I remembered as a kid looking at Nat Geo, had this beautiful infographic of all, just like what you were saying, what we find in our water. One of those things being medications, an incredible amount goes through our body and exits our body and into the water system. And I discovered that it was immediately impacting amphibians. They're either all becoming female, or the males have lost their sex drive, and just thought about how there's this synthetic evolution, and there's this increase in synthetic diversity and a decrease in biodiversity. So I made an array of frogs out of birth control packets. And this was the first time that I guess Synanthrope, I worked a little bit with the community, but this was the first time I made a community project, and I'll tell you why that's so important to me later on too. But I asked my girlfriends for their birth control packets, their empty birth control packets, and that they would share them with me for this project. So you see the different variety. I even have two in the top right corner. One's from Ecuador and one's from Spain. So these were collected from all over the world. And we got to talk about our contraceptives and how can we be smart about them and the impact that they have in the environment. Somebody ended up telling me too that there's like an African wise tale about urinating on frogs to figure out if you're pregnant. So it's funny when you put your art in the world and people tell you these stories that you didn't even realize. So I made, with that piece, I started to think about more about these synthetic materials in the environment, and read that yes, plastic, it doesn't biodegrade, it photodegrades. So with UV light, it breaks down into smaller particles that can be ingested. And I played with the plastic bags and I crocheted them. I love crocheting. And that was the first thing I did. And then I just kept playing with the material and just twisted them and twisted it until it created this fur or grass texture, is what you're seeing. And I'm using, for this early series, Plastic Planet, this is all from 2016, 2015 in my Women in Their Work show. I'm using taxidermy frames. Thought just taxidermy is fake nature. Here's this plastic world that all these critters live in, and still continuing to do the synanthrope creatures. And lots of hot glue. There's Pixel again. When I produced these first series, what was so important to me was to make them as lifelike as possible. And people got really caught up in, what did you make this out of? What is the material? Did you paint it? Like, those were our conversations, was the materiality. And so I thought I need to start giving people more cues about what I'm making, or what I'm using to make these things too. And there was a young lady that told me, you know, if your art's all about fake nature, your animals could be whatever color you want them to be. So this is an early piece that's kind of has taken me in the direction that I'm going in now. They can be creatures. They don't have to be these animals in the world. So here's what Plastic Planet looked like at Women in Their Work in Austin, Texas. I received a Mid-America Art Alliance grant to do it, and I was featured in the PBS series Arts in Context. If you're looking for something to do during quarantine, there's a whole series, 8 different seasons of artists in Austin, and sharing their work with you all. What was so remarkable, and back to saying about, you know, community, and y'all were talking about the plastic bag ban. So in Austin, we had a plastic bag ban. I think it was 2013 that it began. So I came home to Austin. I was living in Kansas City. I returned home to Austin in 2014, started creating this work, and I didn't have access to my material. And that was fine by me, but still I didn't have access. So this work took an incredibly long amount of time because I was scavenging for these animals, scavenging for these materials, just like the animals that I make, basically. And when I could get those colors, because I'm not painting them or anything, they're found, I'm just twisting them. That's the only manipulation. I had to rely on my community to share their trash with me. It first started by asking friends and family. I have coworkers that live outside of Austin that would commute into Austin, and they would collect their Walmart bags, etc. Then it became extended friends would send me their newspaper sleeves. New York Times is blue, the Omaha World Herald is orange. And there was a whole network then when this Arts in Context came out. I had a whole slew of people that saw this episode and started mailing me their plastic bags. Unfortunately, the plastic bag ban was reversed in Texas. Came down to business semantics. I believe that the ledge deemed that no municipality can tell a local business what to do. As we're seeing right now, as our governor is opening up our state, a bunch of local businesses are saying, we don't want to do that. So it's interesting when they say it's municipalities have the right, and then it's interesting when they want the right. So, but what happened with the Women in Their Work shows, so half the gallery was devoted to the art, the other half was devoted to a space which I called the Neocortex Classroom. I built something out that was nostalgic of my elementary school growing up in Austin. So there was an overhead projector, chalkboard. I, in fact, brought in 2 desks from my elementary school to be in this space. And during the course of the exhibition, I saw over 350 school children. And Women in Their Work makes a big effort to reach these kids. They would find buses for them, substitute teachers. And it was a lot of fun. These kids were, I'm showing them the class pet. I had mealworms eating my last styrofoam 7-Eleven cup that I would ever use again, and I allowed these mealworms to eat it. So that this was definitely finding that art, or this education tool, providing education is another part as another material that I can use to share my art with people. So another thing too, just how the education kind of developed, there was a particular moment where there was kind of this call to action. The plastic was like this build, and people seeing the work and then inspiring me to use less plastic and eliminate single-use plastic from my life. And then there's this other defining moment where I met this little kestrel, and it was during my walk to my studio in downtown Kansas City. And she had run into a plexiglass bus station. Window strikes are the #1 cause of bird death or injury. So I saw her, looked into this, and found out, okay, animals don't understand glass. So if you put something on a window, it'll help just let the bird know there's something in its flight path. And I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with this, but a lot of people that I knew weren't familiar with window strikes. So I created a series of digital drawings called Impactproof. It was twofold. It was both, I made these digital drawings and education about what the installation did to avoid window strikes. And then also it came with supplemental education where I taught kids about different bird species, and they could also make their own impact-proof paper decals tracing stencils of my drawings. And this work was all featured, the Synanthrope Station and the birth control packets and Impactproof was all featured in my first educational solo exhibition that traveled by truck throughout the Salt Lake City area for a whole school year through the Utah Museum of Contemporary Art. And I really figured out, like, I need to talk to kids. Again, it's realizing that the plastic problem at its root is this, like, I think it's this cultural thing. There's also these corporations putting the bulk of the work on municipalities to fix, right? Or even telling you as a consumer, it's your job to fix things. But what if we could shift things entirely by changing the culture and have these discussions with kids early? So it's like, I gotta talk to the kids. The reason why too, where I made that classroom, like this 90s nostalgia, like I felt like that was such a big concept that was so important, was to save the planet when I was a kid in the 90s. And then throughout the 2000s, it just went away. So creating that nostalgia and creating this new generation of, activists. So I took Impactproof and some other educational projects to the Utah Museum, or excuse me, this is to the Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art in Bentonville, Arkansas. So here's another iteration of Impactproof where I would teach kids about birding and eBird and iBird. And I did a residency at Kansas State at their beach museum, and I recorded, faculty at Kansas State would tell me about their research, and I recorded it for a podcast in these headphones that I fabricated with a toy maker. Later on, I did a big event for the American Museum of Natural History. It was like 6,000 people or more, but they were so wonderful. They gave me so much help, so I was okay. There's under the big blue whale. And then the Plastic Planet show went to the Galveston Art Center, and I was able to connect with surf riders there. Also met with some city council members, because at the time, 2007 was a really great time for me to be going on this Plastic Planet parade, because a lot of cities in Texas were considering plastic bag bans, Galveston being one of them. Of course, told you what happened now, but prior to that was able to start talking to people about this, and art makes a really big statement with that. Here's some other pieces. This is a crocheted whale that I made. This one's 7 feet long. I have another one I'll show you later that's 20 feet long. So I, again, really was driven to, I got to talk to the kids, and there's lots of residency opportunities with children's museums. So in 2017 through 2018, and the exhibition ended in January of 19, I was their artist in residence and created a experiential exhibition called Dream Tomorrow Today. It was the tricentennial for San Antonio, and they asked me to create an installation of dreaming about what the future could look like. And their perception of the future was, we have all this garbage. What are we doing? What are future humans doing with this garbage? So I was really excited to be asked to be brought on for that kind of thinking. This was the entrance that I built, and it's shaped kind of in the Fibonacci spiral. So I was thinking of technology and nature and balance, and then using all these materials that were very foreign to the kids. They like floppy disks and, you know, VHSs, cassette tapes. We're old people. I'm old. So they didn't understand any of this. They, like, one kid told one of the educators like, this is what we listen to music on. And they go, where do you put your headphones? I don't get it. So this whole world. And when they walked through the Fibonacci spiral, that was the time machine. The first, I thought about, here's two different worlds where something happened. And this is what it could look like. So this first world they walked into was a landfill. And within the landfill, there were lots of creatures doing just fine, making the most out of our garbage. And then there would be language throughout the space. Trash is the future without imagination. Just these points of waste culture should not exist in the future. Nature, I trademarked recently, my slogan is nature never wastes, that's why I reuse. And here there's, what do you want the future to look like? And there's a mirror. And there's a seagull that's choking. He's got a pill bottle beak and he's choking on some stuff. And then there's a vulture waiting for him to die. And then some more materials the kids didn't understand. You turn the corner of the landfill, and then there's this beautiful sequentially growing garden. This could be either taken two ways. I read the book The World Without Us, and just even if something happened terrible, still nature returns, nature is resilient. So it's this sequentially growing garden, and there's no humans there, there's still life, but it's, you know, both complex. It's I wasn't allowed to talk to the kids too much about my dark stuff, right? But but it's complex. So I shared Plastic Planet continued to move around the country. It went to the Ideas Museum in Mesa, Arizona. I thought they did a really beautiful job with the exhibition. And I had a show last spring. It was a solo show at our central library. We have a beautiful, brand new LEED certified central library in Austin. And I said, I have to show in this space. So this whale here, she's 17.5 feet long. And took me 2 years because I started her in 2017 when we didn't have bags in Austin. So this was with a whole community shipping me their bags. Just another, so you can see the scale of the whale, and the little critter from it. The fur and the textures of my animals have definitely continued to evolve. These are now some of my favorite materials, are koozies, caps, and cutlery. We have a lot of graffiti murals in parks in Austin, and people are always throwing their caps on the ground. So I'll take my dog Pixel for a walk and we'll collect caps. Another thing that's been just so profoundly important to me is the circular economy. And we have the most amazing creative reuse center here in Austin, and I'm able to collect a lot of my materials through them. And I, in fact, just joined their board this last week. Some more koozies, caps, cutlery, critters, and they're bread tabs for the teeth too. My grandfather actually created the Exxon tiger, and all of those advertisings for Exxon. So this was kind of an homage, but his tiger was always nice and friendly, and my tiger's mad. They continue to evolve. So this was the first piece from my series, Super Artificial. Again, thinking that little girl said, they don't have they can be whatever color you want. And is exactly right. They can be whatever I want, and they can, you know, and just be even more fantastical and even more mutant hybrid. So this was one of the first, and she was I was currently building for an exhibition that was supposed to open Earth Day. It was the 50th anniversary of Earth Day last Thursday, with the Wolf Museum of Exploration and Innovation, or the MOXIE. And I was building a whole world of these creatures. It was a 12-foot forest that these foxes would live in, and then there was also some taxidermy kind of head critters. So yeah, this is when I'm talking to the kids, you know, live your dreams, kids. I really had this perception for myself of that the mission and the message was always the most important thing when I'm trying to figure out what my medium was. And I'm realizing now more and more if you're going to be true to the message, I've got to get the video out there. I've got to get content that can be seen by many. So this last year, it's a lot of big brands have approached me, which is going to be precarious as well. Even though they want me to be there to share my message, I'm still, at the end of the day, they want their message as well shared. But I had a big opportunity to work with Disney and appeared in 2 commercials for the 30th anniversary of The Little Mermaid. And I built an aerial sculpture for them. And what was really a lovely opportunity, and exactly why I did this, was now I have a lot of girlfriends who are the age that have young children, that have toddlers, and they're getting to share this work with their kids. And you know, that's definitely why I do it, is for those. There's the learning moment too, when the parent and the child are having these conversations. So one of the funniest messages that I received was one girlfriend, we were in elementary school together. Maybe I lost touch with her in middle school, but the Disney commercial came on and her sons were watching, and she said, "Oh, you know what? I went to school with a girl named Calder. She was an artist too." "Oh, that's her," was her story. And what was so remarkable about that as well is that I've had this identity as an artist for such a long time. And it was so cool to be like, oh, people have always seen me this way and been responsive to what I'm making. So yeah, I already mentioned just creative reuse centers, and really excited to help this creative reuse center, and just again, just show people that there's potential in these materials. Certainly we can design out the plastic. In this situation, you know, too, while we're in quarantine, I never want to shame anyone. And there's a lot of people that come to me and go, "Oh, Calder, I'm using a straw." And I'm not PETA, I'm not the police. I just ask everyone, make one better decision a day, or could you repair something? Could you reuse something? But most importantly, it's just, yeah, see the potential in these materials. They can be turned into something, and can we design this wasteful culture out? So that's it. Thank you. I also can, if we have a little time, I wasn't checking the time, but I can share a few things that are happening in my home studio too. That's a good way to do it. So these are more the hybrid fox creatures. You can see some of the materials. Easter eggs. That's a cat for a clothes hanger with a size medium. Some of the koozies. These are new, the new pieces now, especially these little babies. I'm making the frames my own. They're, I make a mold of the head, but then the ears are cardboard. The whole body is wire with lots of foam and duct tape, and then tons and tons and tons and tons of hot glue. I've also been doing some stop motion animations. I didn't know how to share those really via Zoom yet, but the next step too is to make more animations, and I've been building this. I built this whole forest and this whole world that these creatures exist in, and now that's in my studio. So figuring out maybe I can use it to do to make these creatures come to life a little bit more. What's really important too is I want people to see is that these are my tools. Most of the plastic I'm using soft enough to cut with this. Here's one of those spray paint caps, already bright and colorful. And that's the thing too that's so funny about this material is it's so exuberant and bright and fun. And I don't know, there's a philosopher whom I really love. His name is Slavoj Zizek. And he talks, there's a fabulous video segment from this movie that a bunch of philosophers talk in, and he's walking through a landfill, and he says a true environmentalist loves trash, because it's part of our making, it's part of our humanity too, is that we made this big problem. And again, I think it's when we're like shaming people for using it or like creating more bad feelings around it versus the hope or the opportunities. That's where I'm trying, rebrand our relationship with trash.
Calder, that was amazing. Really quick, if you want to quit sharing your screen so we can, ask questions for you, and then we'll promote your social media as well at the end. So if you guys have any questions, again, if you're on Facebook Live, I typed in there, if you have any questions on there, please type them in. And then if you're on the webinar, definitely get into the Q&A or the chat and start asking some questions. I'm going to start off because I was writing down a ton of questions during this. So I know that you've talked about a couple of your, favorite types of plastic or even waste that you use. But like, what is the one that you see that you like, it just keeps coming up? It's like the most easily used for all of your creations and everything. What is the most used type of plastic that you use?
Well, I really got into koozies. And especially I live in South by Southwest land, or what was South by Southwest land. So the amount of promo koozies, oh my gosh, I have a whole box of Bumble koozies. I have yellow koozies for the rest of my life. But that's been a really fun one. And it has along the line of most koozies, there's that when I cut into it, it's black. So there's this bright color with this very black delineated line. And that's kind of how I draw too. I draw very bold, heavy lines when I'm making one of my little critter sketches. So it feels like everything I want it to be. It's so cartoony, so weird and flat. And now I'm starting to collage the koozies with plastic too, to just give it a little bit something more interesting and weird. Yeah, make it weird.
So I have a question as well, which is, hearing you talk and rebranding our relationship with trash. Do you have a piece of advice for us, sort of with everything you've interacted with and with the way that you've started to shift your relationship? Something you said earlier that was so great was just change one habit. But looking at all the trash you see, is there one habit in particular that you would recommend to folks to?
The big thing was you saw, like, I had those mealworms after that. I think it was Stanford said that mealworms could eat and digest styrofoam. And that was my last styrofoam cup. I'm a Texas girl through and through. Emily remembers QT. Loved my big iced tea. And then the thought was, girl, you can make your own iced tea and you can get a steel cup. And you don't need a straw. That thing comes with a sippy cup at the top of it like a baby. And then it was, take it to the next level. I can just buy loose tea and then eliminate the tea bag too. And then that was a huge amount of guilt and a lot of money saved as well.
All right, we've got one question that is asking, how much of your process is planned versus spontaneous?
Well, that's a good question. I'm a planner. I used to draw all the time. Now drawing is mostly for planning. But I have big ideas. I have really big ideas, and I want to build these massive things and big environments for them as I continue to grow. But it's all and also since the projects are so big, there's layers to it as well. I've got to find the funding for it. I've got to find the help for it as well. Now that everything is canceled and I don't have a massive deadline looming over my head where I've committed, and I do a thing where, I cart before the horse, I'll commit to the project before the work's made as well. But the project's a year in the future. I'm like, oh, that'll take a year, but then my work is so intricate and takes a lot of time to make. And I've gotten faster, but intuitive making has never been me. I have a story, it has a function, it's going to be shared in these ways. It has an ends to the means, but now that there is this quiet time, I'm starting to open it up to projects that I've neglected. There's lots of ideas, and there's lots of little projects too that are cumulative that I'll continue to pick at a little bit by little bit, because it's going to be this big thing, and then it becomes this big thing in the end.
Okay, so kind of an offshoot off of that then, I guess, how long does it usually take you to do like one of those, like the foxes at least, like they're not giant or anything, but.
They took months. They're life size. They take months. That plastic process, the twisting and twisting, I had to stop. I have athlete sprains from it. And it's incredibly labor intensive. I have carpal tunnel, hypertension, and tennis elbow from twisting plastic. And I've tried to get help, people to help me with it. Nobody can twist as fast as me. And then I've done potato peelers or drills, and that just takes so much work that I could have twisted 5 more strands of hair between. So, but that just took too much time. But then it was also just I was limiting myself. I was limiting myself just making things out of plastic bags. As you can see now, I'm koozies, caps, cutlery, Easter eggs, weird little bits that I find everywhere. It just, then out of necessity came more, right? There was more potential. And it's the mother of invention.
I have a question here as well, about, you work with kids a lot. And so what has been, 1 or 2 of the most sort of interesting or just kind of enlightening comments that kids have made as they've interacted with this?
Well, I think I hit a few of them that were the most blinding, was just like how technology of my age is already defunct and dead and prehistoric at 35. So I'm getting in touch with that. But the play, they totally get me too, where I'm coming from. But there's this opportunity for they encouraged me to be more playful, I think. And my most successful works of art totally come from that place where I become the 12-year-old version of myself. And I think she'd be really excited about what I'm making.
Okay, so we got a couple more questions and then we might have to wrap up.
Yeah.
But other than, people sending you bags or even koozies, because I know that I have a koozie drawer that I'm like, God, I need to get rid of these koozies. Where else do you find your materials? This is kind of like along the side of like spontaneous versus planned, but do you just go out with Pixel and just pick up?
Yeah. That is where the spontaneity, I guess, comes, is in the materials research and just constantly exploring it. And a majority of what I'm doing is just cutting it up and playing with it and making a new shape. But again, if it's a malleable kind of soft plastic that I know I can cut with my wire cutters, it goes in my pocket for sure. The dog walks. At work, we had a water cooler that had this brilliant bright blue strip and cap on it. And I told the office manager, I have to have this plastic. Would you? And so she set up a little sign for the the water cooler says, please keep these and put them in here. And she left a Ziploc bag for me. I've been keeping all my junk mail now. That's always been just miserable, makes me miserable that all that paper comes in my mailbox and goes straight to the recycling bin. But I've been keeping all of that because I started doing paper mache. And everybody has flour at home right now, right? I'm gluten-free and dairy-free, so I used rice flour. Everybody can try different flours and see which formula works best. But I'm using my my junk mail for that. And I've been keeping all of my bread tabs and all of my bread sleeves. They're a little bit different than most of the plastic bags that I crochet with. The plastic is a little tougher to crochet, but might make something out of that with my the garbage I've kept over quarantine. It's funny, it's difficult with having your studio when you work with garbage at home. It was very nice that there was a place where my garbage and my mess was, but now it's not safe to go there. So trying to handle it is most appropriate. I also live by myself, so it's okay if there's a little mess in the kitchen with all my garbage I'm keeping.
Yeah, it's horrifically relatable, and I'm not making art with my waste. So. But yeah, so thank you.
I keep like all my, right now what I'm holding on to too is like any garments, waiting for that recycling to start up again, because all recycling here in Austin's on hold. And I keep all that stuff, and yeah, it's all sitting in my kitchen right now until I can do that again.
That's wonderful. Again, Calder, thank you so much for coming on. I do just want to reiterate, follow Calder on any type of, oh, we did get a raised hand, sorry. I don't know how to work that, I'm so sorry. If you have any questions, by all means, we'll send them to Calder and we can get answers back to you. But again, follow Calder online. Most of her tags are at Calderful, correct? Oh, I think I lost your microphone.
It's Calderful. You can't hear me? You can hear me? Okay. Okay. Yeah. It's CALDERFUL, Calderful, on Twitter and Instagram.
Yes, and I've been a big fan of your Instagram for quite some time, so I love it so much. Also follow Environment Missouri and Environment Maryland and Environment America. Is there any way that people can help you out, or help the campaign out, or anything like that?
We're looking to see if you have any kind of circular economy stuff. I'm sure everybody's been cleaning out their houses, and there's a lot of kids that are missing out on school supplies. That's really important, making those materials available if you're not going to use them. I'm still accepting garbage. If anybody wants to mail me garbage, they can get in touch with Bridget to get my contact info. I love getting people's trash. It warms my heart, because it's really people telling me that, that I bring them hope and they want to be part of it.
That's great. Thank you again so much, Calder. Kate, do you have anything else to add?
Thank you. This was amazing, and we're just really grateful to have you on.
Thank you so much. Y'all all take care. Be well.
All right, thanks everyone for coming, and again, reach out to us if you have any questions for Calder, and we'll send them along and get answers back for you. Thanks, y'all. Bye.